Picture yourself lost on an old winding road in the middle of nowhere. The night is thick with fog, and the only sign of civilization is a decaying mansion perched on a barren hilltop. This place is called Dead Man's Hill, and for good reason. Those who step inside don't always come back out. Tonight, you'll hear the real story behind one of the most terrifying and unexplained hauntings ever recorded. By the end of this, you'll question what's real and what's waiting for you in the dark. Dead Man's Hill. If you've ever driven past it, you know, something about that place just doesn't feel right. A massive, rotting mansion sitting on the highest point of the hill. Watching, waiting, no birds, no animals, just dead trees and the thick, suffocating silence that surrounds it. The house has been there for more than a century, built in the late 1800s by a man named Victor Holloway. If you don't know that name, count yourself lucky. Holloway was rich, the kind of rich that makes people look the other way when they hear rumors. And there were plenty of rumors. Strange lights flickering behind the windows late at night. Screams, human but not quite. Some say he held secret gatherings, bringing in people from all over, people who never left. No one knows exactly what Holloway was doing inside that house, but what we do know is how it ended. One winter night in the early 1920s, the mansion went completely dark. No servants, no visitors, no Victor Holloway. When someone finally got the courage to go inside, they found something no person should ever see. His wife and child, seated at the grand dining table, their bodies stiff, heads tilted as if they had been listening to something horrible. Their faces frozen in terror, their mouths stretched wide, as if they had screamed until their very last breath. But there was no sign of Holloway, no note, no body, just a house that refused to let go of its past. After that, no one lived there again. By 1921, the mansion was abandoned, but it never stayed empty. Not really. Every few years, someone goes missing, always near the property, always without a trace. Some disappear forever. Others come back, but they are never the same. Take what happened in the late 1940s. A group of teenagers, young, fearless, and looking for a thrill, decided to prove the old stories wrong. They broke in late at night, laughing, daring each other to go deeper inside. Only one made it out, and when they found him, he wasn't laughing anymore, he wasn't speaking, just standing there, his eyes wide, staring at something none of us could see. He never spoke again. Then, in the 70s, a historian named Charles Renner went inside. He had spent years researching the Holloway family, convinced that there was something hidden inside that house, something that would explain what had happened. He was right, but he never got the chance to tell anyone. When the search party finally entered the house, all they found was his notebook, covered in blood. The pages filled with frantic, desperate writing. Warnings scrawled over and over. Don't listen to them. Don't trust the mirrors. He was never seen again. And if you think that's just old history, think again. Because in the late 90s, a paranormal team went inside. This time they brought equipment, cameras, recorders, proof. They spent the night inside, capturing every creak, every whisper of wind. Most of the footage was useless, just static and darkness. But the audio, that was something else entirely. Buried under the white noise was a voice, a woman's voice, distorted, stretched, as if something was pulling the sound apart. But her words, those were crystal clear. Get out, while you still can. The team left that night. Some say they ran. None of them ever spoke about what they saw. Not to the press, not to their families. Whatever they found inside that house, it was enough to silence them forever. Dead Man's Hill still stands today, a house filled with echoes of the past, a place where the missing never return. And the ones who do wish they hadn't. Maybe the stories are just stories. Maybe it's all in our heads. But tell me this. If you found yourself standing in front of that house, staring up at those black, empty windows, would you go inside? Daniel Whitmore had been inside many haunted houses. At least that's what the owners claimed. He had spent years chasing shadows, recording voices in the dark, and searching for proof that most people refused to believe in. But this house was different. The moment he and his team stepped inside, they felt it, that invisible weight pressing down on their chests. The air was thick, stale, filled with something that wasn't just dust. And the smell, it was the first thing they noticed. It wasn't rot. It wasn't mildew. It was decay, deep, lingering, like something had been rotting in the walls for decades. But they kept going. They had a job to do. They set up their equipment. Cameras in every room, motion sensors along the hallways, EVP recorders placed in the spots with the worst history. They were professionals. This was what they did. But then, the house started doing what it does. The first sign was small. The lights flickered just for a second. A power surge? Maybe. Except there was no power in the house. Then the objects began to move. Not in front of them, never while they were looking. They would set something down, a flashlight, a notebook, and minutes later, it would be somewhere else, just out of reach. At first, they brushed it off. It was their minds playing tricks. It had to be. Then one of the cameras caught something, a dark figure at the end of the hall, standing completely still. No features, no movement, just there. Then it was gone. Daniel didn't see it until they reviewed the footage, and by then, it was too late. They kept filming, pushing deeper into the house. The air felt thicker. The silence felt wrong. But still, they stayed. And then, the first real sign that something wanted them there, a door, one they had propped open, slammed shut behind them with violent force. The kind of force that made the walls tremble, that sent dust raining from the ceiling. Someone screamed, they didn't know who, maybe all of them. They ran back to the door, tried to rip it open. Nothing. It wouldn't budge, not even an inch. Then, the mirror. It was old, cracked along the edges. The glass had a sickly yellow tint, warped by time, but it still reflected. Daniel saw himself, his team, the room behind them. But then something else, a figure, standing right behind him, not moving, not breathing, just watching. Daniel turned. Nothing. He turned back to the mirror, and the figure was still there. Then the glass shattered, a sharp snapping sound that sent shards flying across the room. The figure was gone, and that's when the whispers began. Not one voice. Many. A chorus of sounds that seemed to come from inside their own heads. Some were pleading, begging them to leave. Others were mocking, laughing, whispering their names. And then, the team started to disappear, one by one. Daniel would turn a corner, and someone wouldn't be there anymore. No sound, no scream, just gone. The cameras were still rolling. The motion sensors were beeping. But there was no one left to hear them, and that's when Daniel found the journal. It was old, fragile, tucked away in a drawer that looked like it hadn't been touched in years. It belonged to Victor Holloway, and it told the truth. His wife and child, they never died, not in the way people thought. Holloway had been trying to reach something that doesn't belong in our world, something that doesn't just haunt the house. It is the house, a gateway, a place where fear is currency, where the walls are hungry, where every person who has ever set foot inside has never truly left. And then Daniel heard it. A voice right next to his ear. You shouldn't have come. Then static. The camera drops and the screen goes dark. Daniel was alone. The house was empty, or at least it should have been. He could still hear them. The whispers, the laughter, echoing from the walls, slipping through the cracks in the floorboards, voices that weren't supposed to be there. He had to get out, but no matter which way he turned, he ended up right back where he started. The same hallway, the same rotting wallpaper, peeling in long, curling strips, the same dim, flickering light overhead, buzzing like something alive. It didn't make sense. He ran, harder, faster, but his feet only carried him deeper into the nightmare. Every door he opened led to the same hallway, over and over and over again. He wasn't escaping, he was sinking. Then he saw it. A mirror, the same one from before, the one that had shattered, but now it was whole again. Daniel stepped closer. His reflection stared back at him. At first, it was just him, his wide, terrified eyes, the rise and fall of his chest. Then, his reflection blinked. Daniel didn't. His breath caught in his throat. His legs refused to move. The reflection was still staring. And then, it grinned. A wide, awful, unnatural grin. A grin that did not belong on his face. And then, a hand, rotting, blackened, crawling with something that shouldn't be moving. It burst through the glass, fingers wrapping around his throat, clawing, pulling. Daniel tried to scream, but the sound never came. The camera fell. The last thing it captured was the mirror, shattered again, and Daniel, gone. A year later, a new team, different faces, same house. They weren't looking for ghosts, they were looking for answers. They found a camera, old, dust-covered, the battery dead for months, but the footage was still inside. They watched, saw what happened, saw Daniel, saw the moment he disappeared, and then the last frame, frozen. Daniel, staring at the camera, expression blank, eyes hollow, but his reflection, it was still moving, and it was smiling. What do you think really happened to Daniel? Do you believe he's still in there, trapped inside something far worse than death? Or do you think he became part of the house itself? Let me know in the comments below. And if you ever find yourself near Dead Man's Hill, remember, never step inside. And if you do, well, let's just hope we don't end up telling your story next. If you enjoy true horror stories like this, don't forget to like, subscribe and turn on notifications, because there are places in this world where the dead don't rest. And I'll be here to tell you all about them.